When a diligent pediatric nurse, Amelia Harding, observes a small boy, 7-year-old Ethan, arrive for his annual checkup, rigidly refusing to remove his thick, woolen socks despite the overly warm examination room, it is, at first, just another small, perplexing moment in a consistently busy day at the Bright Futures Pediatric Clinic. This wasn't the usual childhood reluctance she often encountered with blood pressure cuffs or thermometers. This was a profound, almost visceral resistance, his small, pale hands clenching the tops of his socks as if they were his only anchors in a terrifyingly unstable world. His wide, hazel eyes darting around the brightly colored room with a hunted, skittish look that seemed far too old, too burdened, for his tender years. The unwavering insistence, the way he'd shrunk back when she'd casually suggested he hop onto the examination table and slip them off, felt like a heavy, unyielding secret being held captive within the knitted fibers. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you believe every child has a right to feel safe and cared for, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that matter. For several appointments over the ensuing months, for minor coughs and then a scheduled vaccination, the sock ritual persisted, a silent battle of wills charged with an unspoken tension, until a more urgent visit for a seemingly unrelated playground injury finally forced her to insist, to gently but firmly pull them off, revealing a hidden truth that would freeze the very blood in her veins and irrevocably alter the course of several lives. Amelia had dedicated 15 years of her life to nursing, the bustling, often chaotic world of pediatrics, her chosen calling. Her small, meticulously kept apartment, filled with books and the quiet companionship of a shy rescue cat named Jasper, often felt too still after a day surrounded by the vibrant energy of children, a poignant reminder of the family she had once hoped for but which life, in its unpredictable way, had not granted. But nothing in her extensive training, nothing in her years of tending to fevers, scrapes, and anxious young patients, could have adequately prepared Amelia Harding for the devastating, almost unimaginable secret Ethan was so desperately trying to keep concealed. Amelia Harding, at 42, possessed a calm, reassuring presence that often worked wonders on even the most fretful children and their equally anxious parents. Her movements were efficient, her smile genuine, her voice soft but firm when necessary. She had a keen eye for the subtle, nonverbal cues that children so often omitted, the slight tremor in a hand, the averted gaze, the sudden stillness that could speak volumes more than words. Her colleagues at Bright Futures, a busy clinic serving a diverse suburban community, respected her diligence and her almost preternatural intuition. Dr. Lena Hansen, one of the senior pediatricians, often commented that Amelia had a sixth sense for when something was just not right with a child, a compliment Amelia usually brushed off with a modest smile, though privately she knew her attunement came from a place of deep empathy and a profound, almost aching desire to protect the vulnerable. The quiet echo in her own life, the space where children's laughter might have been, perhaps sharpened this instinct. She lived a life of quiet routine, her shifts at the clinic, evenings spent reading or tending to her small balcony garden, weekends often dedicated to volunteer work at a local animal shelter. It was a good life, a meaningful one, but a thread of unspoken loneliness was woven through its fabric. Dr. Hansen was Amelia's primary ally at the clinic. A sharp, compassionate woman in her late 50s, Dr. Hansen trusted Amelia's judgment implicitly and was never one to dismiss a nurse's concerns without due consideration. They had worked together for over a decade, forming a strong, unspoken bond of mutual respect. Amelia knew she could always go to Dr. Hansen with her worries, however ill-defined they might initially be. Ethan's mother, Ms. Eleanor Vance, was the one who always brought him to his appointments. Ms. Vance was a woman in her early 30s, impeccably dressed, her blonde hair always perfectly coiffed, her mannerisms initially striking Amelia as perhaps a little too polished, a little too controlled for the often harried atmosphere of a pediatric clinic. She spoke in a low, cultured voice, always expressing profound gratitude for the clinic's care, quick to praise the doctors and nurses. Yet, beneath the veneer of concerned, attentive motherhood, Amelia had occasionally sensed a brittle tension, a subtle undercurrent of something tightly wound. There were no overt rumors, no whispers in the staff room about the Vance family, just Ethan's peculiar, unwavering sock fixation and Ms. Vance's smooth, almost too quick explanations. "Oh, Ethan has such terribly sensitive feet, Nurse Harding. The slightest draft, you know. He just feels more secure with his warm socks on." One afternoon, several weeks after Ethan's annual checkup where the sock issue had first presented itself so starkly, Amelia was at the clinic's reception desk reviewing upcoming appointments when Ms. Vance and Ethan arrived for a routine vaccination. Ethan, as usual, was wearing his thick, dark gray socks, pulled up high. As Ms. Vance was signing in, Ethan, perhaps momentarily distracted by a colorful fish tank in the waiting area, took a tentative step away from his mother. Ms. Vance, without looking up from the clipboard, reached out with a lightning-fast movement. Her fingers, adorned with perfectly manicured nails and several expensive-looking rings, closing around Ethan's upper arm like a vice. Her grip was visibly tight, her knuckles white for an instant. Ethan let out a tiny, almost inaudible whimper and froze, his small face paling. Ms. Vance, still not making eye contact with her son, gave his arm a sharp, almost imperceptible tug, pulling him back to her side. Then, as she handed the clipboard back to the receptionist, she glanced up, her eyes briefly meeting Amelia's. A faint, cold smile touched her lips, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, before she turned her attention back to fussing with Ethan's collar, her touch now overly gentle, her voice a low, saccharine murmur. "There now, darling. Stay close to Mommy." The moment was fleeting, a micro-cameo of discordant behavior, but it sent a chill down Amelia's spine. The contrast between the harsh grip and the subsequent show of maternal solicitude was jarring. Bright Future's pediatric clinic, with its cheerful animal-themed murals, its play area filled with brightly colored toys, and its dedicated staff, was intended to be a haven of healing and reassurance. Yet, Ethan's persistent, silent anxiety, his almost phobic attachment to his socks, cast a small, persistent shadow for Amelia. She observed him carefully during each subsequent visit. He always seemed to walk with a slight, almost imperceptible hesitancy, as if testing the ground beneath his feet. He flinched from unexpected noises. His interactions with his mother were minimal, characterized by a watchful obedience on his part and a kind of suffocating, overly solicitous control on hers. These were subtle signs, easily overlooked in the hustle and bustle of a busy clinic, but Amelia, her sixth sense now fully engaged, meticulously noted each one, a growing unease settling in her heart. The socks, she began to feel with a conviction that defied easy explanation, were more than just a security blanket. They were a desperate, silent plea, a barrier against an unseen, unspoken threat. The routine checkup was in early September. By mid-October, Ethan was back for a persistent cough. The socks remained firmly on. Ms. Vance explained that he'd been a bit clumsy and had a small scrape on his ankle, and the socks were protecting it, keeping it clean. Amelia had wanted to examine the scrape, a standard part of assessing any child with a cough who might also have other minor injuries. But Ms. Vance had been smoothly evasive, assuring her it was nothing at all, just a tiny scratch practically healed, and that Ethan became terribly distressed if his socks were removed unnecessarily. Dr. Hansen, who saw Ethan that day, had deferred to the mother's wishes regarding the socks, focusing on the respiratory issue, but Amelia had seen the flicker of shared concern in the doctor's eyes when Ms. Vance wasn't looking. This subtle exchange between them, a silent acknowledgement of the peculiarity, was a small comfort to Amelia, but it also amplified her own disquiet. The nothing-at-all scrape felt like another layer of obfuscation. A few weeks later, it was vaccination day. Again, the socks. Ms. Vance reiterated the sensitive feet story, adding that Ethan had a touch of eczema on his ankles and the socks helped prevent him from scratching. Each visit brought a new, plausible-sounding reason, yet the underlying anxiety in Ethan, the sheer panic that flickered in his eyes if Amelia's gaze lingered too long on his feet, remained constant. Amelia began to keep a private, meticulous log in her personal notebook, dates of visits, Ms. Vance's explanations for the socks, Ethan's reactions, any fleeting observations of their interactions. It felt clandestine, almost unprofessional, to be keeping such notes, but an insistent inner voice urged her to document, to remember, to piece together the fragments of a puzzle she couldn't yet fully comprehend. One blustery November afternoon, Amelia was leaving the clinic after her shift when she saw Ms. Vance's sleek black SUV parked across the street, near a small, upscale bakery. Ms. Vance was inside the car, visible through the driver's side window, talking animatedly on her phone, a wide, bright smile on her face, her expression relaxed and unguarded. Ethan was in the passenger seat. As Amelia watched, hidden by the flow of pedestrians, she saw Ethan reach tentatively for a pastry bag that was on the dashboard. Ms. Vance, her phone conversation uninterrupted, suddenly swatted his hand away with a sharp, vicious movement, her smiling face momentarily contorting into a mask of cold fury. She didn't even glance at Ethan, her attention remaining on her call. Ethan recoiled as if struck, his small hand flying to his mouth, his body cringing back into the seat. A moment later, Ms. Vance ended her call, and her expression instantly reverted to one of smooth, maternal composure as she turned to Ethan, saying something Amelia couldn't hear, but her tone, even from a distance, seemed cloyingly sweet. This second micro-cameo, this stark, private display of casual cruelty juxtaposed with a carefully maintained public facade, solidified Amelia's fears. This wasn't just over-attentiveness. This was something far more sinister. The image of that swift, angry swat, and Ethan's terrified reaction, burned itself into Amelia's memory. Amelia's concern began to consume her. She found herself thinking about Ethan constantly, her sleep troubled by fragmented images of his wide, fearful eyes. She discreetly asked a colleague in medical records if there was any history of injuries, any previous concerns flagged for Ethan Vance. The records were unremarkable, showing only routine visits, minor childhood illnesses. Ms. Vance, it seemed, was adept at managing appearances, at keeping any potential problems carefully under wraps. Amelia considered an anonymous call to Child Protective Services. But what would she say? That a child insisted on wearing socks? That his mother seemed a bit too controlling? It felt flimsy, insufficient, potentially damaging to Ethan if her suspicions were unfounded and Ms. Vance became aware of her scrutiny. The fear of overstepping, of being wrong, was a heavy weight, but the fear of being right and doing nothing was even heavier. She decided to speak more directly with Dr. Hansen. During a quiet moment between patients, Amelia laid out all her observations: the persistent sock-wearing, Ms. Vance's shifting explanations, the interaction she'd witnessed both in and out of the clinic, Ethan's palpable fear. Dr. Hansen listened intently, her expression growing increasingly grave. "Amelia," she said finally, her voice low, "I share your unease. There are too many inconsistencies, too much anxiety in that child. But without more, our hands are somewhat tied. We can't force an examination of his feet without a clear medical indication, especially with Ms. Vance being so protective, or perhaps obstructive. But we need to be vigilant, document everything, and the next time Ethan is in, for any reason, I want to be the one to see him. We need to find a way to address this sock issue directly, professionally." Dr. Hansen's validation was a profound relief, but also a somber confirmation. They were in this together, but the path forward was still dangerously unclear. The opportunity, when it came, was not what Amelia had expected. It was a frantic call from Ms. Vance on a cold, early December morning. "Nurse Harding? It's Eleanor Vance. Ethan. He had a fall at the park yesterday evening. He landed awkwardly on his foot. He cried all night, and it's terribly swollen this morning. I think he might have broken something. Dr. Hansen isn't in today, is she? Could we possibly see Dr. Chun?" Dr. Chun was a newer, younger pediatrician at the clinic. Amelia's heart lurched. A fall. A swollen foot. This was it. This was the undeniable medical reason they needed. "Ms. Vance," Amelia said, keeping her voice calm and professional. "Dr. Chun can certainly see Ethan. Can you bring him in right away?" When Ethan arrived, leaning heavily on his mother, his face pale and etched with pain, the foot in question, his left one, was indeed visibly swollen, even through the thick gray sock. Ms. Vance was a picture of maternal distress, her voice trembling as she recounted the terrible accident on the slippery playground equipment. Amelia led them to an examination room, her own heart pounding. This was the moment. Dr. Chun, a kind but less experienced physician, entered and began his assessment. He gently palpated Ethan's lower leg, then his ankle. "Okay, Ethan," Dr. Chun said softly. "I'm going to need to take this sock off so I can get a better look at your foot and ankle, all right?" Ethan, despite his obvious pain, began to tremble violently, tears welling in his eyes. "No, no, please, don't. It hurts. Don't take it off," he cried, his voice shrill with panic. Ms. Vance immediately interjected, her hand protectively on Ethan's shoulder. "Oh, doctor, he's so distressed, and his skin there is so sensitive. Perhaps you could just assess it through the sock for now? Or maybe an X-ray first." Dr. Chun hesitated, looking uncertain. Amelia, standing nearby, knew this was the critical juncture. She caught Dr. Chen's eye and gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. "Dr. Chen," Amelia said quietly but firmly, "with this degree of swelling and tenderness, a thorough visual examination of the skin and underlying structures is essential before any imaging, to rule out open wounds or circulatory compromise. We need to remove the sock." Ms. Vance's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something cold and hard in their depths. "Nurse Harding, I really must insist." But Amelia stood her ground, her gaze unwavering. "It's standard procedure, Ms. Vance, for the child's safety." Dr. Chun, taking his cue from Amelia's confidence, nodded. "Nurse Harding is right, Ms. Vance. We need a clear view." With Ms. Vance protesting under her breath about overzealous nurses and unnecessary distress, Amelia knelt beside Ethan. "Ethan, sweetheart," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I know you're scared, and I know it hurts. I promise I'll be as quick and as gentle as I possibly can. We just need to see how to make your foot better, okay? Can you be brave for me for just 1 minute?" Ethan was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face, his small body rigid with terror. But he gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Amelia's hands were steady, despite the tremor she felt deep inside. She reached for the top of the thick, woolen sock on his left foot. It was damp, she noticed, and there was a faint, unpleasant odor, masked somewhat by the cloying scent of Miss Vance's expensive perfume. As she began to gently, carefully, roll the sock down, inch by painful inch, Miss Vance's protests grew louder, more agitated. "Be careful. You'll hurt him. His skin is like paper there." The sock clung stubbornly to Ethan's swollen ankle. And then, as the fabric finally began to give way, revealing the skin beneath, Amelia Harding froze. Her breath caught in her throat. The world seemed to tilt, the bright colors of the examination room fading to a dull, sickening gray. Dr. Chun, peering over her shoulder, let out a sharp, involuntary gasp. Ms. Vance fell abruptly silent. Concealed beneath the thick, innocent-looking sock was a sight of unimaginable horror. Ethan's small foot and ankle were not just bruised and swollen from a simple fall. They were a grotesque patchwork of old and new injuries, a testament to sustained, horrific abuse. Encircling his ankle like a brutal manacle was a deep, ulcerated ligature mark, raw and oozing in places, the skin around it a mottled purple and angry red. Similar, older, faded scars, pale and puckered, were visible higher up his calf, suggesting repeated bindings. His toes were misshapen, some bent at unnatural angles, their nails discolored and thickened. But it was the sole of his foot that elicited a fresh wave of nausea from Amelia. It was covered in a horrific constellation of what appeared to be circular, deep burns, some freshly blistered, others scabbed over, still others scarred white, as if from repeated applications of a cigarette or some other heated implement. The stench of infection, now unobscured by the sock, was overpowering. This was not the result of a playground fall. This was torture. This was a child's secret, desperate agony, hidden day after day, week after week, beneath a pair of ordinary woolen socks. Amelia felt a roaring in her ears, her vision tunneling. For a moment, she thought she might faint. Dr. Chun, though visibly shaken, his face ashen, quickly regained his professional composure. "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I need you to step outside into the hallway, please. Nurse Harding and I need to attend to Ethan immediately." Ms. Vance, her face a mask of disbelief that was rapidly crumbling into something akin to panic, began to stammer. I don't understand. He just fell. It must have been worse than I thought. Outside. Now," Dr. Chun repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. As Ms. Vance, her eyes darting wildly, reluctantly left the room, Dr. Chun turned to Amelia. "Call 911, Amelia. Tell them pediatric trauma, suspected severe abuse, possible sepsis. Then call hospital security. And get Dr. Hansen in here, stat. This is a crime scene." The adrenaline surged through Amelia, overriding her shock, her horror. Her training kicked in. She made the calls, her voice surprisingly steady. While they waited, she and Dr. Chun did what little they could to make Ethan comfortable, carefully cutting away the remaining sock, their hearts aching with every pained whimper he emitted. Ethan, his terrible secret finally exposed, seemed to have collapsed into a state of shocked, exhausted resignation, his small body trembling uncontrollably, his eyes squeezed shut as if he couldn't bear to see the damage himself. When Dr. Hansen burst into the room, her face grim, she took one look at Ethan's foot and her expression hardened into one of cold, righteous fury. "Dear God," she whispered, before her own professional demeanor took over. The clinic, usually a place of healing and routine, had become the epicenter of a waking nightmare. The countdown to intervention, to ensuring Ethan's immediate safety and Ms. Vance's apprehension, was on. The pressure was immense, the stakes impossibly high. Amelia looked at Ethan's small, ravaged foot, and a vow formed in her heart. She would see this through. She would not let this child suffer alone a moment longer. The arrival of the paramedics was swift, their calm professionalism a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil that filled the small examination room. They worked with focused urgency, assessing Ethan's vital signs, gently cleaning the horrific injuries as best they could, administering pain relief. Ethan, now barely conscious, flinched and cried out softly as they worked, each sound a fresh stab to Amelia's heart. 2 police officers, a man and a woman, arrived shortly thereafter, their presence casting a somber, official pall over the scene. They spoke in low tones with Dr. Hansen and Dr. Chun, their expressions grim. Ms. Vance, Amelia learned later, had been detained by clinic security in a separate office, her initial protests having quickly dissolved into a stony, uncooperative silence when confronted with the undeniable evidence of her son's injuries. Agent Peterson from Child Protective Services arrived next, a woman with kind but weary eyes that had clearly seen too much. She conferred with the doctors and the police, her questions precise, her demeanor compassionate but firm. Amelia, though her role in the immediate medical intervention was now secondary, stayed close by, a silent, supportive presence for Ethan. She watched as they carefully splinted his leg, the burns on his sole making any pressure excruciating. The officers took photographs, documenting the horrific extent of the abuse. The playground fall story had evaporated, replaced by a far more sinister and undeniable truth. The sheer, calculated cruelty of it was almost incomprehensible. To inflict such pain, and then to so meticulously, so brazenly, conceal it, day after day, it spoke of a profound depravity. Amelia found herself thinking of the small, seemingly insignificant details she had observed over the months. The way Ethan always walked with that slight hesitancy, his flinching from unexpected noises, Ms. Vance's too smooth explanations, the fleeting glimpses of her cold anger. Each one now clicked into place, forming a horrifying, cohesive picture. The guilt that she hadn't pieced it together sooner, hadn't acted more decisively before, was a heavy weight, but it was overshadowed by a fierce, protective anger towards Ms. Vance and an overwhelming surge of compassion for Ethan. As the paramedics prepared to transport Ethan to the hospital, he stirred, his eyes fluttering open. They found Amelia's. For a moment, there was a flicker of the old, familiar terror. But then, as if sensing a shift, a change in the atmosphere around him, His expression softened into one of profound, heartbreaking vulnerability. He didn't speak, couldn't speak, but his eyes, filled with unshed tears, conveyed a silent, desperate acknowledgement. It was as if, even in his pain and confusion, he understood that his terrible secret was finally out, that someone else now knew, and that perhaps, just perhaps, help had arrived. Amelia reached out and gently squeezed his small, uninjured hand, her own tears finally beginning to fall. "You're going to be okay, Ethan?" she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "We're going to help you. You're safe now." The decisive turning point had been reached. Ethan was on his way to medical care, and Ms. Vance was facing the full force of the law. The long, hidden nightmare was, at last, beginning to end. After the ambulance, its sirens a mournful cry in the winter air, had pulled away from the clinic, a profound, almost suffocating silence descended upon examination room 3. Amelia stood amidst the discarded medical supplies, the lingering scent of antiseptic and something far more foul, and finally allowed the full weight of what she had witnessed to wash over her. Her legs felt weak, her hands trembled. Dr. Hansen put a comforting arm around her shoulders. "You did well, Amelia," she said, her voice filled with a quiet intensity. "You trusted your instincts. You saved him." But Amelia could only shake her head. The image of Ethan's ravaged feet seared into her mind. In the aftermath, the clinic was abuzz with hushed, horrified whispers. Agent Peterson informed them that Ms. Vance had been taken into custody. The initial charges were severe child abuse and neglect. The investigation into the full extent and duration of Ethan's suffering was just beginning. Bright Futures Pediatric Clinic immediately implemented new, more stringent red flag protocols for any instance where a child consistently refused examination of a body part without clear, verifiable medical history, or where a guardian's explanations seemed evasive or inconsistent. Amelia's meticulous notes, her persistent observations, became a crucial part of the official record, a testament to the importance of vigilance. Weeks later, after Ethan had undergone multiple surgeries and was beginning the slow, arduous process of physical recovery in a specialized pediatric burn unit, Agent Peterson arranged for Amelia to visit him. He was in a bright, cheerful room, filled with donated toys and cards, but his small body was still swathed in bandages. He was quiet, his eyes still holding a shadow of his past trauma, but the hunted, terrified look was gone, replaced by a fragile, tentative curiosity. When he saw Amelia enter, a tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. He couldn't speak much yet, his voice still hoarse from disuse and pain, but he reached out a small, bandaged hand. Tucked into his palm was a single, slightly crumpled, colorful sticker of a smiling cartoon lion. He pressed it into Amelia's hand. It was a small gesture, almost insignificant, yet it felt monumental. Then, he pointed to a drawing he had made, a shaky, childlike depiction of a nurse with kind eyes, holding a small boy's hand. In that silent, profound exchange, that small offering, Amelia understood. She hadn't just uncovered a terrible secret. She had helped open a door for a little boy to step out of an unimaginable darkness and into the first, fragile light of safety and hope. The physical scars Ethan bore would, with time and care, begin to fade, but the emotional and psychological wounds would require years of patient, dedicated therapy and unwavering support. Recovery from such profound betrayal and cruelty wouldn't be instant or easy. But for the very first time in what had likely been most of his young life, Ethan was truly safe, surrounded by people committed to his healing and well-being. The path ahead was undeniably challenging, but the foundation for recovery, for a future where he could perhaps one day run and play without fear, had finally, blessedly, been laid. Amelia returned to her work at Bright Futures, her heart forever changed by Ethan's ordeal. The quiet routines of the clinic now felt imbued with a deeper sense of purpose. Her vigilance heightened, her empathy sharpened. Her small, solitary apartment still felt quiet in the evenings, but it was a different kind of quiet now, less about loneliness and more about a profound, if somber, gratitude for the chance to make a difference. She had faced a darkness she had never imagined, and in doing so, had helped bring a child into the light. Several months later, as Ethan continued to make remarkable progress in a specialized therapeutic foster home, Agent Peterson approached Amelia with an unexpected question. Ethan, she explained, was forming strong attachments to his caregivers, but he frequently asked about Nurse Amelia, the nurse who had been so kind, the one who had made the owies stop. He needs long-term stability, Amelia, Agent Peterson said gently. A loving, permanent home. Given the extraordinary bond you forged with him, the trust he clearly has in you, the agency would strongly support your application if you ever considered becoming his foster-to-adopt parent. It's a long road, but Amelia looked at the slightly crumpled lion sticker, which she now kept tucked in her wallet. She thought of Ethan's brave, tentative smile, of the unspoken promise in his eyes. A warmth, profound and undeniable, spread through her chest, chasing away the last vestiges of her old loneliness. Yes, Amelia said, her voice thick with an emotion she recognized as pure, unadulterated hope. Yes, Agent Peterson. I would consider it very, very seriously. It was the quiet, luminous beginning of an entirely new chapter, a future neither of them could have foreseen, a family about to be pieced together from the fragments of pain, bound by courage, compassion, and an unbreakable, healing love. That evening, Amelia sat on her small balcony, looking out at the city lights. Jasper, her cat, purred contentedly on her lap. She held Ethan's drawing of the nurse and the little boy, its simple lines conveying a world of meaning. A sense of earned peace, a quiet, resonant satisfaction, settled over her. The path ahead would not be easy, but it would be filled with purpose, with connection, and with the tangible, enduring presence of love. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more.
When a school principal notices an 8-year-old girl who begs to stay late every single day, volunteering for every after-school activity, and finding excuses to avoid dismissal time, every instinct tells her something is deeply wrong. Day after day, the child's desperation to remain at school grows more obvious as she pleads with tears in her eyes to help with cleaning, organizing, or any task that will delay her inevitable return home. What the principal discovered when she followed up on the child's living situation would reveal a horror that explained why school felt like the only safe place in this little girl's world. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you believe in being a voice for children who are too afraid to speak, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that matter. At first, Dr. Amanda Foster thought the girl was just unusually helpful until she uncovered the terrifying reason behind her desperate need to avoid going home. Dr. Amanda Foster had been the principal of Maplewood Elementary School for 12 years, and in that time, she'd developed what her staff called an uncanny ability to sense when students were struggling with problems that extended far beyond typical childhood challenges. Her office, strategically positioned with windows overlooking both the main entrance and the playground, allowed her to observe daily patterns of student behavior, family interactions, and the subtle dynamics that often revealed which children might need additional support or intervention. At 51, Amanda brought extensive experience from her previous roles as an elementary teacher for 8 years, followed by 6 years as an assistant principal in an urban district that served a high-needs population. Her progression through various educational leadership positions had provided her with comprehensive understanding of how family trauma, economic instability, and abuse could manifest in children's academic performance, social interactions, and school behavior patterns. Amanda's leadership philosophy was grounded in the belief that schools served as more than educational institutions. They functioned as community anchors and safety nets for vulnerable children who might have nowhere else to turn for stability, nutrition, emotional support, or protection from harmful home environments. Her approach to school administration reflected this understanding, emphasizing staff training in trauma-informed practices and creating systems designed to identify and support students facing difficult circumstances. The school served a mixed suburban community in northern Michigan where families ranged from professionals working in the nearby college town to agricultural workers and service industry employees dealing with seasonal employment fluctuations and housing instability. Amanda had developed expertise in recognizing how different forms of family stress, financial pressure, domestic violence, substance abuse, mental health crises, could impact children's educational experiences and overall well-being. Her administrative responsibilities required her to be present during arrival and dismissal times, providing daily opportunities to observe parent-child interactions, transportation arrangements, and general family dynamics that often revealed important information about students' home environments. Over 12 years, she'd learned to recognize signs of neglect, abuse, or family dysfunction that might require school intervention or coordination with outside agencies. On this particular Monday morning in early April, Amanda was conducting her routine supervision of morning arrival when she noticed 8-year-old Emma Rodriguez approaching the building with obvious reluctance. Moving slowly despite the fact that she was already running late for the start of classes, unlike most students who hurried when they realized they might be tardy, Emma seemed to be deliberately delaying her arrival as if she preferred to face consequences for lateness rather than arrive on time and begin the countdown toward dismissal. What struck Amanda as particularly concerning was Emma's body language and general presentation. Despite the mild spring weather, Emma appeared tired and somewhat disheveled, with clothing that suggested either poor laundering facilities or possible overnight wear. Her backpack appeared unusually light, lacking the typical weight of completed homework assignments or necessary school supplies. And she carried herself with the careful posture Amanda had learned to associate with children who were experiencing chronic stress or physical discomfort. Emma Rodriguez had been on Amanda's informal observation list since the beginning of the school year, though not for any single dramatic incident that would have prompted immediate intervention. Instead, she'd attracted attention through an accumulation of behavioral patterns that suggested a child who was struggling in ways that weren't immediately obvious to classroom teachers or other school personnel. Unlike most third graders who displayed typical excitement about dismissal time and weekend plans, Emma consistently demonstrated anxiety and reluctance when the school day ended. She had developed increasingly creative strategies for extending her time at school, volunteering for classroom cleanup duties, requesting additional help with assignments that she clearly understood, and finding reasons to visit various staff members' offices during the final periods of each day. Most significantly, Emma had become the unofficial volunteer for every possible after-school activity, regardless of whether she had previous interest in or aptitude for the specific programs. She had signed up for tutoring sessions she didn't need, joined clubs focused on activities she'd never expressed interest in, and repeatedly asked teachers if there were additional ways she could help with school events or classroom preparation that would require staying past normal dismissal time. Amanda's experience with troubled children had taught her that students who consistently sought to extend their school day often had compelling reasons for avoiding their home environments. While some children stayed late due to positive factors like enrichment opportunities or social connections, others did so because school represented the only safe, stable, or nurturing environment in their daily lives. During her lunch break, Amanda decided to review Emma's academic and behavioral records more systematically, looking for patterns that might explain her obvious reluctance to leave school and her increasing desperation to find legitimate reasons for extended stays. What she found was both concerning and revealing, suggesting a child whose home environment was becoming increasingly problematic. Emma's academic performance had been declining gradually since January, dropping from solid B average work to inconsistent performance that suggested difficulty concentrating or completing assignments outside of school. Her homework completion rate had fallen dramatically, with missing assignments becoming more frequent, despite Emma's obvious intelligence and classroom engagement during school hours. More telling, Amanda noticed that Emma's absences and tardiness had specific patterns that suggested transportation difficulties or inconsistent adult supervision. She was frequently late on Monday mornings and absent on Fridays, suggesting that weekends might be particularly chaotic or unstable periods in her home environment. When she did arrive late, Emma often appeared as if she had dressed herself without adult assistance or had slept in her clothing. Amanda also reviewed comments from Emma's teachers and specialist instructors, looking for additional perspectives on her behavior and academic engagement. What emerged was a picture of a child who was thriving during school hours, but obviously struggling with circumstances beyond the school environment. Emma's current teacher, Mr. Johnson, had noted that Emma seemed to come alive during classroom activities, but became increasingly anxious as dismissal time approached. She frequently asked for additional explanations of concepts she clearly understood, requested permission to organize classroom materials during recess periods, and offered to help with tasks that typically required adult supervision. Her art teacher, Mrs. Kim, reported that Emma had begun creating artwork that depicted houses and families in concerning ways, homes with no doors or windows, family figures that appeared isolated or distressed, and scenes that suggested themes of abandonment or fear. While children's artwork wasn't always literal representations of their experiences, the consistent patterns in Emma's creative expression suggested underlying emotional struggles related to family or home environments. Most significantly, Emma's music teacher, Ms. Garcia, had documented several instances where Emma had asked to remain in the music room during lunch periods, claiming she wanted to practice instruments, but actually seeming to use the time to avoid less supervised periods like recess, when her anxiety about going home became more apparent. The cumulative evidence suggested that Emma was experiencing increasing stress related to her home environment and was using school activities as coping mechanisms to delay returning to whatever circumstances awaited her outside the school building. Amanda's administrative experience told her that children who desperately sought to extend their school day often faced neglect, abuse, or family dysfunction that made home feel unsafe or unstable. Amanda decided to begin documenting Emma's behavior more systematically, paying particular attention to her interactions during transition times and her responses to discussions about family activities, weekend plans, or home-related topics that might provide additional insight into her living situation. That afternoon, Amanda positioned herself to observe dismissal procedures, specifically watching Emma's behavior and pickup arrangements. What she witnessed confirmed her growing concerns while providing additional details that suggested Emma's home situation was indeed problematic. Emma was among the last students to exit the building, despite repeated announcements about dismissal time and teacher encouragement to gather her belongings. She moved with obvious reluctance toward the pickup area, frequently stopping to ask staff members if there were any additional tasks she could complete before leaving. When Emma's designated pickup person arrived, a woman Amanda didn't recognize who appeared to be in her 20s, the interaction was brief and seemed strained. The woman showed obvious impatience with Emma's slow movement toward the car, and Emma's body language suggested fear or anxiety about the impending ride home. Most concerning, Amanda observed that Emma appeared to be scanning the pickup area as if looking for alternative transportation options or possible ways to avoid leaving with her designated guardian. Over the following week, Amanda made a point of being visible during dismissal time to observe Emma's pickup arrangements and general demeanor when leaving school. What she discovered was a pattern of inconsistent transportation, emotional distress during departure, and increasingly desperate attempts to find reasons to remain at school. Some days, Emma was picked up by the same young woman Amanda had observed previously. Other days, different adults arrived to collect her, sometimes men who appeared to be under the influence of alcohol or drugs, sometimes women who seemed agitated or impatient with normal childhood behaviors like moving slowly or asking questions about evening plans. Most disturbing, Amanda noticed that Emma's emotional state seemed to correlate with her pickup arrangements. On days when she was collected by calm, sober adults, her anxiety was manageable, though still present. On days when her transportation involved adults who appeared unstable or potentially dangerous, Emma's distress was obvious and sometimes resulted in tears or physical symptoms like stomach aches that seemed designed to delay her departure. Amanda's concern reached a critical point when she observed Emma during a particularly difficult Tuesday afternoon in mid-April. The child had spent the entire day asking various staff members if there were additional ways she could help with school activities, and when dismissal time arrived, she became visibly distraught at the prospect of leaving. "Is there anything else I can do to help get ready for tomorrow?" Emma asked Amanda directly, her voice carrying obvious desperation despite her attempts to sound casual and helpful. "I'm really good at organizing things and cleaning up." "That's very thoughtful of you, Emma," Amanda replied gently, noting the child's obvious anxiety and the way she kept glancing toward the dismissal area with dread. "We always appreciate helpful students. Is everything okay? You seem worried about something." Emma's response was immediate and revealing. Her eyes filled with tears that she fought to control, and her voice became shaky as she attempted to maintain her request for additional school responsibilities. "I just really like helping at school. Can I please stay and help with anything? I don't mind staying late." The desperation in Emma's voice and her obvious distress at the prospect of leaving school convinced Amanda that immediate action was necessary. Rather than continuing to observe patterns, she recognized that Emma's safety might depend on understanding her home circumstances immediately. "Emma, I can see that you're feeling upset about something," Amanda said carefully, kneeling down to Emma's eye level in her office. "Sometimes when kids don't want to go home from school, it's because things at home don't feel safe or comfortable. Is that what's happening with you?" The question triggered an immediate emotional breakdown that confirmed Amanda's worst fears. Emma began crying uncontrollably while nodding, her small body shaking with relief at finally being asked directly about the circumstances she had been trying to avoid through her elaborate school-staying strategies. "I don't want to go there," Emma whispered through her tears. "The people are scary and they're always angry and loud, and sometimes they forget to give me food or they make me stay in my room for a really long time." The disclosure provided immediate confirmation that Emma was living in an environment characterized by neglect and possible abuse, explaining her desperate attempts to remain at school where she felt safe and cared for. "Can you tell me more about the people at home?" Amanda asked gently, beginning to gather information that would be necessary for protective intervention. "It's not my real home," Emma explained, her voice still shaky, but becoming clearer as she felt safe to share information she'd been holding inside. "I'm staying with my mom's friends because my mom had to go away for a while. But they don't like having me there, and they get really mad when I need things like food or help with my homework." All right. The revelation that Emma was living in an informal placement with adults who weren't her legal guardians immediately raised concerns about both her safety and the legality of her living arrangements. Amanda's administrative experience told her that children placed in unofficial care situations often lacked proper oversight and protection, making them vulnerable to neglect or abuse. "How long have you been staying with these friends?" Amanda asked, trying to understand the scope and duration of Emma's current circumstances. "Since before Christmas. My mom said it would just be for a little while, but she hasn't come back yet, and the people say they don't know when she's coming to get me." The timeline suggested that Emma had been living in an unstable, potentially harmful environment for several months, explaining the gradual decline in her academic performance and the increasing desperation in her attempts to avoid going home. "Emma, what you're telling me is very important and I'm glad you trusted me with this information," Amanda said firmly. "Children should always feel safe where they live, and they should always have enough food and proper care. What's happening to you isn't okay, and there are people whose job it is to make sure children are safe and properly cared for." Rather than continuing the interview and potentially traumatizing Emma further, Amanda made the crucial decision to contact Child Protective Services immediately while ensuring that Emma remained under school supervision until proper authorities could assess her situation and arrange appropriate placement. The call Amanda made that afternoon set in motion a series of events that would dramatically alter Emma's living situation and provide her with the safety and stability she had been desperately seeking through her school avoidance strategies. When CPS investigators arrived at the address where Emma had been staying, they discovered living conditions that met legal definitions of child endangerment and neglect. The unofficial guardians Emma had been placed with were operating what appeared to be an informal and illegal child care arrangement, housing multiple children in overcrowded conditions without proper licensing, supervision, or resources to provide adequate care. The adults involved showed evidence of substance abuse and had been collecting government benefits intended for the children's care while providing minimal supervision and inadequate nutrition. Emma was immediately removed from the harmful environment and placed in emergency foster care with Linda and David Park, experienced foster parents who specialized in caring for children who had experienced neglect and abandonment. Their warm, stable home had been designed to provide healing environments for children who had lost trust in adult caregivers, featuring consistent routines, abundant food security, and gentle structure that helped children feel safe and valued. "We're so happy to meet you, Emma," Linda said gently when Emma arrived at their home that evening, carrying the few belongings she had been able to gather from her previous placement. "We know you've been staying in a place that didn't feel safe, but you don't have to worry about that anymore. Our house is a place where children are loved and protected." Emma's initial response to the stability and warmth of the Park family was complex, relief mixed with disbelief that such security could be permanent, and anxiety about whether she deserved the kindness and care they were offering. "Do I have to find ways to help so I can stay here?" Emma asked quietly, this question revealing how her experience with the informal guardians had taught her to earn her place through useful behaviors rather than expecting care as a basic right. "No, sweetheart," David explained with a warm smile. "You get to stay here because every child deserves a safe, loving home. You don't have to earn your place here by being helpful, although we always appreciate when family members are kind to each other." The concept of unconditional care and belonging was revolutionary for Emma, who had spent months believing that her value was determined by her usefulness to the adults responsible for her care. Over the following days, Emma began the gradual process of learning to trust that she would be consistently fed, housed, and cared for without needing to perform specific behaviors to maintain adult approval. The Park family, experienced in working with children recovering from neglect, provided patient guidance as Emma adjusted to regular meals, consistent bedtime routines, and the emotional security of knowing where she would be sleeping each night. Amanda visited regularly, both to support Emma's transition and to witness the remarkable transformation that adequate care and emotional security created in a child who had been struggling for survival. Within the first week, Emma's anxiety about school dismissal disappeared completely as she understood that going home now meant going to a place where she was wanted and protected. Most significantly, Emma began displaying the natural curiosity and enthusiasm for learning that had been suppressed by her chronic worry about basic safety and survival needs. Her academic performance improved dramatically when she could complete homework in a quiet, supportive environment with adults who prioritized her educational success. 2 weeks after her rescue, Amanda received news that provided hope for Emma's long-term stability and family connections. The investigation into Emma's original family situation had located her maternal aunt, Patricia Rodriguez, who lived in California and had been searching for Emma since her sister had disappeared several months earlier. Patricia had been unaware of Emma's location and circumstances, believing that her sister had moved to another state with Emma for employment opportunities. When Patricia learned about Emma's situation, she immediately began the legal process to obtain custody and provide a permanent, loving home for her niece. What this means, the social worker explained to Emma, in terms she could understand, is that you have an aunt who loves you very much and wants to take care of you permanently. She has a nice home where you'll have your own room, and she's been worried about you and looking for you. When Emma met her Aunt Patricia for the first time in months, her reaction was one of overwhelming joy and relief at reconnecting with someone who represented genuine family love and connection rather than the temporary arrangements and unofficial placements she had experienced. "Mija, I've been searching everywhere for you," Patricia said tearfully as she embraced her niece. "I'm going to make sure you never have to worry about where you're going to live or whether you're safe. You're going to live with me, and we're going to be a real family." 3 weeks after her rescue, Emma had begun displaying remarkable resilience and healing capacity that amazed even the experienced professionals working with her case. Her natural intelligence and creativity, which had been channeled into survival strategies and elaborate school-staying schemes, now flourished as she experienced consistent family love and educational support. Amanda was completing her afternoon administrative duties when Emma appeared in her office doorway one day, now carrying a backpack full of completed homework and wearing clothes that fit properly and showed evidence of careful, loving preparation. "Dr. Foster, guess what?" Emma announced excitedly as she entered the office with the confidence of a child who no longer feared dismissal time. "My Aunt Patricia is going to pick me up today, and we're going to go shopping for school supplies because she wants to make sure I have everything I need to do my best work." The enthusiasm Emma displayed about normal family activities, school shopping, homework support, and time spent with a caring adult represented how much healing had occurred in just a few weeks. "That sounds wonderful, Emma," Amanda said, feeling tears of joy at the complete transformation from a child who desperately avoided going home to one who looked forward to family time and educational support. "I'm so happy that you have a loving aunt who wants to help you succeed in school. Tia Patricia says I'm going to live with her permanently, and I can join after-school activities because I want to, not because I'm scared to go home," Emma announced proudly. "And she's helping me write a letter to thank you for helping me when I was scared." As Emma headed toward the dismissal area, now moving with the eager anticipation of a child who looked forward to going home, Amanda reflected on the transformation she'd witnessed. In the space of just weeks, a frightened child who had been desperately seeking ways to avoid leaving school had become someone who could express excitement about her family relationships and educational future. 5 months later, Amanda received an invitation that filled her with professional satisfaction and personal joy. Emma and her Aunt Patricia were hosting a celebration dinner to mark Emma's first semester of excellent academic performance in her new school in California, and Emma had specifically requested that Amanda be included in their family celebration. When Amanda video called into the celebration dinner, she found Emma thriving in every possible way. She had gained healthy weight, her academic performance was consistently excellent, and she was participating in voluntary after-school activities like art club and soccer because she enjoyed them, not because she was avoiding going home. "Dr. Foster," Emma greeted her through the video call, beaming with happiness and wearing a bright dress that showed she was well cared for and loved. "Look at my report card. I got all A's, and my teacher says I'm one of the most helpful students in class." The pride Emma took in her academic achievements, combined with her healthy relationship with being helpful rather than desperately seeking ways to avoid going home, demonstrated her complete transformation from survival mode to healthy childhood development. "I'm so proud of you, Emma," Amanda said, feeling overwhelming emotion at seeing the complete transformation from a frightened child avoiding home to a confident student celebrating her achievements with her loving family. "You've worked so hard, and I can see how happy and successful you are." "I want to be a principal like you when I grow up," Emma announced confidently. Tia Patricia says helping other kids who might be scared is a really important job, and I want to help children feel safe at school like you helped me. Stories like these remind us that school administrators serve as crucial advocates for vulnerable children, combining educational leadership with protective oversight to identify those who are silently crying out for help. Every day, heroes like Amanda are making these life-saving observations through attention to behavioral patterns that don't make sense and willingness to investigate when children's actions suggest they're seeking refuge from dangerous home environments. But how many children are still finding desperate ways to avoid going home, using school as their only sanctuary, while waiting for someone to notice their silent plea for protection? Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more powerful stories of rescue and redemption.